Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our next class. And we're looking at the laws of chinuch ketanim, teaching small children, educating them. Let's have a look at the basis of this mitzvah. And we can find it, funnily enough, in the Shema. You have it in the first paragraph. You also have it in the second paragraph. Let's look at in the second paragraph where it says, "V'limadatem otam et benechem lebebam, v'shiptecha beveitecha, v'lechtecha v'derech, v'v'shochbecha v'kumecha." And you shall teach them to your children, to speak with them when you sit in your home, and when you walk on the way, and when you lie down, and when you get up. And we also have the very famous pasuk in Mishleh, Chanoch lana'ar al pi darko, gam ki yazkin lo yasur mimena. Train a child according to his way, even when he grows old, so that he will not turn away from it. And here, the Metzudat David comments on this, that hatchel v'hargelet hana'ar b'shanim, we should initiate and get the child accustomed to this when they're very young, that they should follow this in the service of God, according to their wisdom, if a little or a lot, depending on their age and their capacity. And once they've become accustomed, once they're used to serving Hashem, as gamki yaskin lo yasur mimena, you will find out that when they get old, they will not depart from it. Because once they've dedicated themselves to succeed in doing it, then they're not going to want to change their behavior. So it's saying here, if you raise a child when they're young to follow in the service of Hashem, and you start it at a young age, it's going to become rote, it's going to become part of who they are, and so therefore they'll never want to come to change from it. And the Gemara in Masechet Nazir says, Amar Reish Lakish, Kedei lehancho b'mitzvot, kesavar ish chayev lechanech beno b'mitzvot. So that's the Gemara there, the Reish Lakish held, in order to educate him in mitzvot. What does that mean? That means that Reish Lakish holds that a person is obligated to educate his son in mitzvot. Now, there's a whole question. Is this mitzvah d'oraita on a Torah level or d'Rabbanan? Is it rabbinic? Well, we have the pasuk in Bereshit regarding Avraham. It says, what is the reason that Avraham is beloved by Hashem? It tells us, Ki yedativ l'man asher yitzaver banav beito acharav v'shamru derech Hashem. Why is Abraham beloved? Because he commands, he gives instruction for his family, his household, to follow the way of Hashem, to do tzedakah or mishpat. That is the reason why he is beloved. And says from here, the Meshech Chochmah, that from here, that this is, that it's on a rabbinic, not on a rabbinic level, on a Torah level, it's a mitzvah that we have to educate our children. However, other achronim do not agree with the Meshech Chochmah, and they hold it is only rabbinic. And you can see that here, the Gemara in source number 7, and the Shulchan Aruch codifies this here in source number 8, Katan she'enot tzarich le'imo, once a child no longer needs his mother, which is around the age of 5 or 6, chayav b'sukkah, that child is obligated to be in the sukkah, midivrei sofrim, on a rabbinic level, kedei lehancho b'mitzvot, so that he can be educated or trained to follow mitzvot. So therefore we see, at least for a father, for a man, it is a rabbinic mitzvah to educate his children. The book now continues asking about what is the obligation for the mother, and you can see these sources on your own. It's a little dry, and I want to skip to get to a little bit more of an interesting part of it. Now, we're going to skip now to page 132 to source number 15. And here we're going to get into a discussion about There's one thing to train our children to be doing mitzvot. What about training them not to do prohibitions? Am I also obligated in that? Do I need to tell them to be careful to keep kosher or to keep Shabbat? Do I need to do that, or tell them they cannot eat non-kosher food, or they cannot desecrate Shabbat in a particular way? So it might be, I might have think, I give all the positives, but the negatives I don't need to do. So here, looking at that, the Shulchan Aruch says here in source number 15, Katan ochel nevelot, if a child eats not meat which hasn't been slaughtered correctly, ein beit din mitzavin lahafrisho. The beit din is not obligated to stop this. Aval aviv mitzuva legaor bo ulahafrisho. But the father is obligated to tell off his child and to separate him from doing this. Says the Rama, what is the father obligated to do? Me'isur da'oraita. If the child is doing a negative, a prohibition, which is on a Torah level, ulachilo biyadayim, and feeding him directly, that is asur afilu devarim she'asurim divrei sofrim. That is forbidden, even if it's only rabbinically prohibited. V'chein asur lahagilo b'chilul Shabbat u'moed. And similarly, it's forbidden to accustom the child, to get him used to breaking Shabbat or the holidays. Afilu b'devarim shehem mishum shivut. Even things which are only rabbinically prohibited. So again here, certainly I'm not allowed to allow the child to do in Isur D'Oraita. And Isur D'Rabbanan, a rabbinic prohibition, I cannot allow them, I cannot help them, I cannot be actively involved in that. But certainly it's not good form to get them accustomed to breaking Shabbat and breaking Yom Tov, even if it's only rabbinically prohibited. And don't worry, we're going to get into the discussion about if it's necessary, if one is allowed to have a child break Shabbat or Yom Tov. The Yesh Omrim, the Rama adds, the kol zeh bekatan de lo higia lechinuch. All that we've said here is a child who hasn't yet reached the age of chinuch, i.e. younger than 5 or 6. Aval higia lechinuch, if the child has reached the age of education, of training, we need to hold them back, even from something which is rabbinically prohibited. The Yesh Omrim, and those who say, D'lo shayach chinuch lebeit din, ela la'av bilvad. And there are those who say that this is not an obligation to the Beit Din at all. This is only something which is applicable to the father. Although some of the points mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah here are a bit complex, it seems clear that a father must tell off a child who is violating a prohibition, at least if it's on a Torah level, and prevent him from doing so. The Mishnah Berurah adds that although the Ramah claims that the father need only rebuke a child violating a Torah level mitzvah, in truth, he must prevent the child from violating rabbinic level mitzvot too, due to the mitzvah of chinuch, of training, of educating them. And Mishnah Berurah says this follows, afilu lechanech banav ubnotav v'mitzvot hutal alav. And even educating one's children in mitzvot is incumbent upon him, as it's written, chanoch l'na'ar al pi darko. Educate the child according to his ability, his path, but kol shekain, and how much more so, lahafrisha mi'isor, to separate them from doing a prohibition. The mutar ala'am, that this is part of what is incumbent upon the father, the parent, to educate his children. And then it continues, mi'isor da'oraita, be'emet, afilu mi'isor da'rabanan chayev lahafrish. He even has to distance him from a rabbinic prohibition. As is needed, okay, even from a rabbinic level mitzvah. Ela nafkamina, what is the practical difference? To be isod rabbanan im lo ifisho ha'av, ein beit din mochin biyado. So what's the practical difference? If the father was allowing the child to do rabbinic prohibitions, the Beit Din does not need to step in. But if the father is allowing his son to do Torah level prohibitions, there the Beit Din would be involved in trying to rebuke the father in order to get him to stop. Now, this is a very important discussion here, which is, you hear a lot of new age parents saying, you know what? I'm going to wait till the child is older. And when the child is bar mitzvah, or the child is a teenager and an adult, when they're 18, they can decide if they want to keep kosher, if they want to keep Shabbat. All that, I tell you, is hadras. Why? Because you can see it here. If you wait till the child is grown, then you've missed a vital stage of chinuch. Because the whole thing is inculcating them when they are young, so they're used to practicing it. Morning berachot, making a beracha before they eat, eating kosher food, keeping Shabbat. It's much easier, even when they don't understand everything, to teach them when they're young. To tell them, you know what, you decide when you're older, I'm not going to do anything. It's not saying I'm making that an even playing field. You're making it that much more challenging. In fact, it's not an even playing field. You've made it impossible, or at least that much more challenging. You're making it to the point where it's almost as if you're treating the child like they're a potential convert to Judaism. They're learning from scratch. And so therefore, I take these mekorot very seriously in trying to help us understand that not only do I need to educate them to do the right thing, I also need to educate them from doing the wrong thing as well. And the Mishnah Berurah, in the continuation, also discusses the age at which the mitzvah of chinuch begins, both for positive mitzvot, as well as staying away from negative mitzvot. And he writes here, know that the age of education for a positive mitzvah is different for every child according to his sharpness and knowledge, for each matter in its own context. For instance, one who is aware of Shabbat, the father must accustom him to listen to Kiddush and to hear Havdalah. One who knows how to wrap properly, how to put on tzitzit, is obligated in tzitzit. And the same goes for every positive mitzvah or even rabbinic mitzvah. But education for a negative mitzvah, both for Doraita, Torah level mitzvot, and for rabbinic prohibitions, it is for any child with understanding who understands when they tell him that this is asur, that is forbidden to do or to eat. But a young child who has no awareness at all, his father is not commanded to prevent him to eat forbidden food or break Shabbat against his will, even concerning a biblical prohibition, since he does not at all understand what he, the father, is preventing him from doing, and that he is separating him. Okay, the practical age at which these halachot take effect are discussed, and we'll see as we carry on. All right, now
clarify or ask a question.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to distinguish, and I know, just to clarify for me, the difference between teaching the child and prohibiting them from doing it. So should you still tell them even though they don't yet understand it?
So give me an example.
4-year-old kid or 3-year-old, whatever, you explain, on Shabbat we don't turn on and off the lights, for example. Then they do because they forget because they're 3. And so do you not tell them at all because they're not really at an age where they can get it? Or do you still tell them and then just remind them gently?
So we're going to see there's a whole discussion of whether it's at 2 or 3 or at 5 or 6 where they get this. So it's really interesting that you mentioned the age of 4, because that kind of hits that middle spot there where there might be a pikeach, a very smart child who understands and doesn't. So why is it that we're trying to do this education at an early age? So one is that we want to inculcate them young so that it becomes hergel, it becomes common practice. But the other one is, if you wait till they're bar mitzvah or close to that age, it's going to be very hard. So the only things which we wait till that time is something like fasting. Fasting, we only do at bar or bar mitzvah or when they get to that age. But regarding other things like keeping Shabbat, both the positives and the negatives, we want to get there. We want to get there as early as possible. I know you've got other things going on. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So carrying on, helping a child violate a prohibition. What about this? Am I allowed? Let's say that it says here that it doesn't. This is a challenging one here. In addition to the two elements that we've discussed of training a child to observe mitzvah and prevent them from violating a prohibition, there's another element to the mitzvah as well, which is not helping them violate a prohibition. Okay? And this was mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch above, and is forbidden even when the child is very young and has not yet reached the age of chinuch. And we can see this from the Gemara in Yevamot. It says, Lo tochlum ki sheketz. You shall not eat them, for they are disgusting. Lo tochilun. What does that mean? Lahazhir hagedolim al katanim. Lo tachilum, which is you need to be careful that the elders, i.e. the adults, are telling the children. Delo lisfole biyadam. That an adult may not feed his young children non-kosher food by direct action. And so you can't say, you know what? Kashrut's expensive. So until they're bar mitzvah, I'm going to give them non-kosher food to save money. You can't do that. You can't feed them that non-kosher food. And Torah uses this phrase of lo tochilum 3 times concerning the consumption of insects, the consumption of blood, and impurity. And the Ramban explains that we derive from these 3 cases that this principle of not directly causing children to violate a prohibition applies to all other halachot as well. As he says here, and there are many warnings in the Torah about this, as the Midrash notes concerning blood, insects, and impurity. And we can derive from this, and we can derive from them to all prohibitions in the Torah that we may not assist children to violate any of them. But if they do it of their own accord, we are not obligated to separate them. However, the Gemara in Yevamot also implies that one who is not a parent may even assist a child in violating a prohibition, as long as one does not directly instruct the child to do so. So let's see what that means, and have a look at this carefully. The Gemara says, Rab Yitzchak bar Bizna, Irkasule mifteche debei midrasha b'rishut harabim b'shabbata. He lost the keys to the Beit Midrash. He lost it in the main street on Shabbat, and there's no Eruv, or he doesn't hold by the Eruv. Ata lekame de Rabbi Padat. He came in front of Rabbi Padat. Amar le, and Rabbi Padat gave him the following piece of advice. Zil debar tali utalia b'litailu hatam. De'i mishkachei lehu, mighty lehu. Here's what Rabbi Padat said to him. Go and lead the boys and girls, and let them walk where the keys were lost. And if they find them, they'll bring them to you. What does that mean? Alme kasavar, katan, ochel nevelot, ein beit din mitzavin lahafrisha. Apparently, what do we learn from here? That Rav Padat maintains that regard to a minor who eats non-kosher meat or violates other prohibitions, the Beit Din is not commanded to prevent them from doing so. So what should I do if I lose my keys? Well, I can't ask my own daughters. I can't ask Ruti and Tova, Kochav and Gabi are over. But I could ask the local children, can you go and walk along here? And if I don't tell them, look for the keys, but a child gets up and goes, look, I found a key, and walks all over, I guess I can get back into Beit Knesset, I can get back into my home. Okay, that's what it says. Now, Rabbi Padat held that it was permitted for one. Oh, hold on, we'll take a question. I can see John's got his hand up. Go for it, John.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, though, the entire motivation in that particular case, right, is to hope that the children will then go and violate Shabbat, because if the keys weren't lost, you wouldn't be sending the kids out right all over the street to wander. And so that seems sort of dodgy.
It doesn't seem dodgy, it is dodgy. And we're going to get further into this as we carry on. I think what it's trying to say is, at what point is a child obligated in mitzvot? And the answer is very clear. A child is only obligated in mitzvot when they are bar or bat mitzvah. If that's the case, then why do we spend such an effort educating them when they're young? Because it's so hard to teach them once they get to that age. And so therefore, because it's a technicality, if on occasion they are to break Shabbat, it's not a major issue. And so therefore, who's the one who could do that? Someone who doesn't know them that well, not a parent. I'd even say not a primary teacher. It was interesting that Rabbi Padat gave the advice, but Rabbi Padat was not the main teacher of these young boys and girls who were asked to find the keys. I think it's important that whoever is involved in that, it's not someone who is having a close relationship with these children. So it's saying, if it happens once, twice, three times, whatever, it's not a regular thing. It doesn't matter, provided that A, it's not a parent, or even B, it's not someone who has a close relationship with them. Because as we said, technically speaking, the child is not obligated yet in that mitzvah. Now, the child is not obligated. I'm not just saying technically, the child is not obligated in the mitzvah. The reason why it sounds strange to us is because we have this halacha in Shulchan Aruch, which says, don't get the kids used to this. That's why, because it's the way that we're raising our children, not to have this insensitivity to Shabbat observance or any other manner of law.
But I don't understand. Okay, yes, not the parent. Yes, not the teacher. But if, the Mara Da'atra of the community, the leader of the community, whatever they are, is encouraging the kids, what kind of modeling is that? And the kids are like, well, I don't really have to because that rabbi encouraged us to do this.
So again, did you pay attention to the Gemara? I don't think that was what the Gemara was really saying. I think you may have made about 700 leaps into that one. Again, I know you're trying to do it for dramatic effect, but I think that was a little, even for me, that was a little bit too dramatic. I don't know whether that's really what was going on.
The person who is creating this scenario of leading the kids in the street does have Rabbi, Rav, whatever in front of their name.
Yes.
Right? So from that, I'm entitled to make all the leaps.
Okay, so again, the person is not telling them go out and find the keys. You miss that step?
No, I got that step. They're on a treasure hunt instead of going to find the keys.
Correct. They're outside playing. They may bring him snails. They may bring him worms. They may bring him dirt. They may bring twigs. What children normally bring. Instead, they bring a shiny key. So I'm saying this is the key here. No pun intended. When you say that you are bringing the children there, yes, it's likely the children will find the key. But there's a difference between saying, go find me the key, go open the door, go do this, then go play. And we all know what he's asking, but guaranteed none of those kids know what he's asking. Again, if he does this every single week and this is part of his normal behavior, then yes. The whole thing is, can't be something which is happening all of the time. Okay? All right, let's see further, and I think we'll get more into some of the crux of what you and Jonathan are discussing. All right. Harambam says as follows. מצווה על האביב לגעור בו להפרישו כדי להנחו בקדושה. שנאמר, הנוך לנער על פי דרכו. So even though the Beit Din has no role in this, the father must, with all integrity, rebuke his child whenever they are behaving in a way which is distancing them from learning how to behave properly in a religious Jewish Torah lifestyle. And the Lechem Mishneh adds, ומה שכתב אף על פי שאין בית דין כולי, זוהי סברת רבנו ראויה אליו. This was only a logic which our teacher Harambam taught. This is not something where he has a direct source. The Shulchan Aruch, together with the Mishnah Berurah and Sem Halacha, already quoted earlier rules in accordance with all of these points. And therefore we can see this again. Katan ochel nevelot, if a child eats non-kosher meat, ein beit din mitzuvin lahafrisho. The beit din is not obligated to stop the child. Aval aviv mitzaveh lig'or bo lahafrisho. The father is obligated and must tell off the child and stop the child from doing this. Haga mi'isur doraita. That's only from a Torah level prohibition. But we think for Sfaradim, not only is it from Torah prohibition, any type of prohibition, including rabbinic, as it says, it carries on, when one is not allowed to directly feed them non-kosher food, even if it's only rabbinically prohibited. And similarly, it's forbidden to accustom them to break Shabbat or the holidays, even when it is rabbinic level. Okay, so we saw all of this. Okay, so let's carry on down. We're going to skip this Mishnah Berurah a little bit. And see this Kaf HaChaim. And he says, even though the Beit Din is not commanded to prevent him from violating, even so, it is forbidden for them to tell him that it is permitted, since he would be eating based on their instruction, which would be equivalent to feeding him directly. So this coming to John and Sharona's point here, which isn't the rabbi, the Maradatra, coming and say, come boys, come girls, let's go and find some keys. That's not exactly what's going on. And I think it's important that when we learn the Mekorot, that one has to be making a read. Now you can say, but that's exactly what he wants, is true. But he's not saying that, and only the adults or the older children can realize that. There's no 4 or 5-year-old who knows that's what he's asking, unless he's doing that week in, week out. And then for sure, it's a major problem. Okay, John, go for it.
Okay, but sort of putting together two of the things you just said, right? In this scenario, you've got someone who says, hey kids, let's go for a scavenger hunt. Right? Let's say it's my kid who happens to find the key and brings it back, and then comes home all excitedly later and says, hey, Dad, great news. We wanted a scavenger hunt and I found a key and I gave it to the rabbi. And I said, it's Shabbat, right? You shouldn't be picking up a key because I'm the father, I'm obligated to rebuke. And so now, like by virtue of this scavenger hunt that isn't really a scavenger hunt, it's setting up this poor kid to go home and get an obligatory rebuke from his or her father.
You are right, and then you could end up in a situation of what was the rabbi thinking, and was that an Orthodox rabbi or was it just? I won't go there. I'm joking. All right, only half in jest. You're right. The likelihood of it happening like this is remote. But again, I always think that some of these, the Maaseh here, the story in the Talmud is not coming, it's not coming to contradict, it's coming to tell you how important, and this is maybe not inferred directly, but telling you how much the education of our children is not on educators, but on parents. And we don't realize how much of a role we have on our kids. We can say the kids are at school 8 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever, but or 8 to 3, but it's really, it's on us, And therefore it's saying whatever they learn at school, whatever they may learn at the synagogue, whatever they learn at summer camp, it's only secondary to what we do. We are the primary impactors on raising our children. And maybe perhaps that is a subtle reminder there in the Gemara, and possibly in the law codes there, where it's saying whatever rabbis can do or the Beit Din can do, maybe technically okay, but a parent can never do that, because the parent is still, whether he puts it on other organizations or not, he is the primary, the father is the primary educator, which is interesting again in itself when we think of mothers are normally the ones who are raising the children, and it's saying, no, the obligation is on the father, and where that lies. Okay, any other comments, thoughts, questions? I'm ready to take you all on. I've got both fists. I'm here. Anything. Rubisa, come on. You still don't like that Gemara. You hate it.
I really dislike it. And, you know, in the course of my life, I've seen it understood and misunderstood, that like we'll even hold children in front of a light switch, and then they might hit the light switch when the light isn't in the way we want it.
We're going to see that. We're going to see that one as well. It's coming up. It's coming.
All right.
We have to wait to see if we get there. It's only 7:32 and Mincha is at 8 o'clock, so we've got a bit more time this week. We'll see where we get to.
All right, then I'll be quiet and let it go.
There we go. Let's see where we get to. All right, now, I want to skip through all of this. I want to skip. Yeah, skip. You can read this on your own. All right. Children violating prohibitions in case of necessity. Here is the Rubisa's question. All right, ready or not, here we come. All right, let's see. Shulchan Aruch. V'yesh omrim, shekol shehu letzorko shel tinok, kegon achila u'shtiya, lo gazu bo hachamim klal, u'mutar la'achilo biyadayim, kol davar she'in isuro ela midivrei sofrim, im tzarich lakach, af al pi shehigia lechinuch. Some say that any case where it is for the need of the child, such as eating or drinking, the Hachamim did not decree at all, and it is permitted to directly feed him anything whose prohibition is rabbinic, if he needs it, even though he has reached the age of chinuch. Aval im eno letzarich lakach, but if he does not need it, asur lachilo, it is forbidden to feed him. Afilu eno bar havana, even if he is not of understanding. And he adds, and the father does need to rebuke him. Imhu bar havana, if he has reached the age of understanding. Afilu biso divrei sofrim, even if it's only rabbinically prohibited. Shehare, because behold, asur lahaniko chalevi mo acha esrim ve'arba'a chodesh. Because it is forbidden for him to nurse from his mother's milk after 24 months. Even though the prohibition of consuming breast milk while nursing is only rabbinic, since he doesn't need it after 24 months. And one may rely on their words to be lenient concerning a rabbinic matter if he needs it, and there is no Gentile to feed him. So what's going on here? I want to look at these two notes before I explain it a little bit more. The halacha of not nursing once the child does not need it anymore, i.e. after 24 months, is mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch in Yoreh De'ah, citing the Gemara and Ketubot. The reason for this rabbinic prohibition is that one may think that if it is permitted to drink breast milk while nursing, then it is also permitted to consume milk from a non-kosher animal. It is permitted to drink it, though once it has been placed in a utensil, since its identity is less obvious and the aforementioned concern is less relevant. And then it says in number 8, this approach is actually based on the Rashba and the Ran. However, the Biur Halacha opines that the Shulchan Aruch does not agree since he does not differentiate between cases where the child needs the food or other forbidden activity to be done or not. It is thus a machloket achronim, whether one may be lenient in such cases of necessity. Nevertheless, it may be permitted, according to all, to allow the child to violate the prohibition in such cases, if the parent does not explicitly instruct him to do so. And if you want more information on this, see practical applications discussed as we get there further on.
I don't understand at all. What is the prohibition of drinking breast milk while nursing? Isn't that what one is doing while nursing? That is consumption of breast milk, no?
The question is, at what age is the child prohibited to nurse?
It's prohibited at 24 months?
That's what that seems to be a machloket.
La Leche League would say otherwise.
I would say there are certain mothers who would say otherwise. I mean, keep nursing that child till he's 7 or 8, absolutely. Clearly it's saying there's a problem there. It's a surprising halacha, but let's go to one which might be more interesting or more practical, which is, can you feed a child kitniot if they are Ashkenazi? Okay, can you feed them kitniot? It is forbidden to feed a forbidden food, even to a baby that is 1 day old. But for medicinal purposes and for health, it is permitted. Therefore, it is good not to give infants formula that contains chalav akum, if that's something that they hold by, if the family holds by it. Similarly, it's permitted to give a child cereal on Pesach that contains kitniot that are kosher for Pesach, even though the parents do not eat kitniot. And so therefore you can see there are scenarios where I, for example, would only eat Chalav Yisrael, but I could feed the child Chalav Stam, or I don't eat kitniot, but I could feed the child kitniot. Okay, now going back to the breast milk one, yes, it does sound strange to our ears, but clearly there seems to be an issue. I might want to give a rationale to that, which is that a child shouldn't reach an age where he understands that he's nursing from his mother or she is nursing from her mother. It's more something of a small child, and therefore it creates the modesty of the mother from the child. There should be a certain level of distance there between the mother and her children, which isn't, which may be coming from that. We don't create something unhealthy. And again, you can la lecture me all you want. There you go. Or la lecture me all you want. There you go. Oh, wow, I'm getting into my puns tonight. Now, other examples of this principle where it is permitted to allow a child to violate a rabbinic prohibition are here. For example, it is permitted, look at this, to give a child a chumash or a siddur to bring to synagogue on Shabbat, even via a road that has no eruv, provided that the chumash or siddur is specifically for that child. It's permitted to give a child cake that has letters on it for him to cut and eat. Remember, this is a machloket Maran Rama. Can you cut the letters on the cake? And the Kaf HaChaim famously sides with the Rama to say that Sfaradim shouldn't do it either. But it's saying perhaps there's room to be lenient for children, that they are not, no, there is room to lenient. It is allowed. It is allowed to feed a child before tefillah and before he hears kiddush. So therefore you have groups on Shabbat. They don't need to make kiddush. Now at SBH, we do have the kids making kiddush, but it's not necessary. An interesting point here. And you might say by the time the kids are going to groups on Shabbat, they're definitely old enough. And maybe that's why, even though it's technically permitted, we don't follow that lenient position. In a case of need, it's permitted for an adult to give a haircut to a child on Chol HaMoed, even if the child had already reached the age of chinuch. And even though he is not allowed to give himself a haircut on Chol HaMoed due to the decree of the sages. Going on further, 100% it's allowed to give a child a haircut during the Omer, because that's even less strict than the laws of Chol HaMoed. Again, these are things which are technically permitted, but people don't do. Now we're going to jump into the scenarios which John and Sharon have been waiting for. Here we are. A young boy, age 6, is scared of the dark, and his night light was not turned on before Shabbat. Is it permitted for the parents to instruct or allow him to turn it off on his own? Okay, here we'll find it in the Piskei Teshuvot, and it says as follows. The Sfaradim are generally strict about this, in accordance with the fact that the Shulchan Aruch does not specify such a leniency, but the Ashkenazim, who are lenient in the case of a mitzvah, have upon which to rely, especially if it is only a happenstance and not a regular occurrence. And even for Sfaradim, there is room to be lenient in a happenstance occurrence, but it is forbidden, according to all opinions, to give him something that is forbidden on a Torah level, even if it is not for his need and benefit. But if the child takes it on his own without us instructing him to do so, if it is for his vital physical needs, there is no prohibition according to all, even for a biblical prohibition, and one does not need to separate him from it or rebuke him. So according to the Piskei Teshuvot, telling a child to violate a rabbinic prohibition is subject to dispute, while telling him to violate an Isur D'Oraita, that would be 100% forbidden. In contrast, all agree that it is permitted to let him violate any prohibition on his own without instructing him to do it. Thus, it would seem that if the child insists on turning on the light, all would agree that the parent need not protest, but instructing the child to turn it on would be subject to the aforementioned machloket. And so therefore, in our classical case, if we just stop here, it would seem if the child is scared of the dark and they want to turn on the light, they can do it and you don't need to tell them off. However, you want them to turn on the light would seem to be not allowed, especially if you instruct them to do so. So let's jump to our second question. Someone forgot to turn on, okay, before we jump into the second question, John's got his hand up. Go for it, John.
So this might actually tie into where you're going right now. So feel free to kick it down the road if it does. But it seems like then if I forget to turn on one of the lights in my house and I want it on, I could just say to the kids, hey, we're going to have a scavenger hunt in the dark room over there. And if one of them should happen to turn on the light so that we can have that scavenger hunt, then hey, I didn't tell them to turn on the light. And again, that just seems really dodgy.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into the section of dodgy. Look at this question. Okay, we're going to see it. They're going to get progressively worse. Let's have a look. Someone forgot to turn on the heater in a room before Shabbat. May a parent bring his 2-year-old son to the heating controls and have him turn it on, provided there is no non-Jew available to do so? The answer to this question should be that it is permitted, since as we learned above, it is permitted for a parent to assist a child under the age of chinuch in violating a prohibition, provided that the parent does not directly tell them to do it. This is indeed the ruling given by Rav Simcha Bonim Cohen in his work, Children in Halacha, in the quote below, though the parent should not express obvious satisfaction at the result. So you got to do this in a way of, oh, too bad you turned on that light. You can't be excited like, great job. You can't do that. You got to be like, no, don't do that again. So seeing that here, he writes, we learned that it is forbidden to instruct or cause a child to violate a prohibition, even if the child is below chinuch age. However, it is permitted to place a forbidden item in front of a child, even though the child will make use of that item in a forbidden manner. Accordingly, one is permitted to place a child of less than chinuch age in front of a light switch so that the child may turn it on or off. Likewise, if it is not certain the child will turn the switch, one may even place a child's hand upon it. One must remember, though, that if switching off the light will benefit only the parent, and the child realizes that, the parent must stop the child from doing so. Okay, so there needs to be a little bit of, I would say a little bit of common sense here, which is, where are you going with this? Do you want your child to be the expert Shabbat goy to the point where you reap what you sow, and you're going to be spending a lot of time in therapy helping that child to keep Shabbat properly when they get older. And I think that's where I think John and Sharon are coming from, which is we've got to be careful with how many loopholes we try, because if you're going to be using loopholes which technically don't break Shabbat, but ruin the neshama or ruin the aspect of keeping Shabbat, then obviously you're going to have a challenge. We're going to stop here, and we're going to continue this next time.